Despite his head being covered in scars and his face full of wrinkles, with even a fly having flown into his eye, Dracula and the nuns fought a fierce battle over him. Just a month ago, Harker was a successful, ambitious lawyer. His company had sent him to handle some business for an old count. However, halfway through the journey, the coachman forced him out of the carriage, refusing to go any closer to the count's castle, no matter how much money was offered. The locals pressed a crucifix into his hands for protection, and others looked at him with pity, because those who visited the count's castle never came out alive. Before Harker could process the strangeness of the situation, the Count's carriage whisked him away to the castle. As soon as he rang the doorbell, countless bats flew out of the castle, swarming around and biting him. But when the castle gates opened, the bats scattered in fear. Driven by both his career and his love for his fiancée, he stepped into the eerie castle where the aged and decaying Count Dracula had been waiting for him for some time. The dining table was laid out with a feast, all prepared for Harker. The Count himself seemed to refrain from eating, instead staring intently at Harker as he dined. Harker's purpose was to assist the Count in purchasing a few properties, and once the paperwork was signed, he planned to leave. But the Count seemed to have taken a liking to Harker's proper British accent, and insisted that he stay to tutor him in English. With little choice, Harker remained to help the Count improve his language skills. The castle was a maze, with spiral staircases stretching endlessly upward. Dracula personally helped Harker settle in. When Harker took out his small mirror, the Count immediately shattered it. Harker didn't give it much thought, but while picking up the pieces, he accidentally cut his finger. The scent of blood tempted Dracula, forcing him to leave quickly, with a promise to meet again the following night. After the Count's departure, Harker discovered a plea for help scratched into the window frame, carved with fingernails. Startled, he leaned out and spotted a woman's figure on the upper floors. There was something deeply unsettling and eerie about the entire castle. Yet Harker slept soundly, dreaming vividly of his fiancée, Mina. Every morning, Harker woke up feeling utterly exhausted, as if drained of all his energy. While Count Dracula grew increasingly youthful, Harker began to contemplate escaping, but the castle's labyrinthine layout made it impossible to find the exit without the Count's guidance. And being a kind-hearted man, he didn't want to abandon the woman who had called for help. Dracula never appeared during the day, leaving Harker free to explore the castle. The woman's figure would often flicker in and out of sight. After several more days, Harker felt as though he had aged 10 years. His hairline had noticeably receded, while the once ancient Count now looked middle-aged. Harker couldn't bear to stay any longer. His explorations led him deeper into the castle, where, in the depths of the basement, he found numerous bodies sealed in coffins. Panicked, Harker stumbled into a hidden chamber where he found a coffin with Dracula's name carved on it. Cautiously, he peeked inside. When Harker awoke again, it was as though he had forgotten the previous night's terrifying ordeal. His mind was foggy, his limbs weak. Meanwhile, the Count had fully regained his youth and insisted that Harker write a letter to his fiancée, reassuring her that he was safe. Suddenly, images of Harker's intimate moments with his fiancée flashed through his mind, but they weren't dreams. In reality, it had been Dracula pinning him down. To protect his fiancée, Harker had no choice but to comply with Dracula's demands. Meanwhile, Dracula had already begun constructing wooden boxes, preparing for Harker to soon join the ranks of the undead. However, Harker was no ordinary man. He was a well-educated, sharp-minded lawyer. He managed to uncover the secrets of the castle. Hidden within the portrait of the architect's wife was the castle's map. Once he pieced the map together, Harker discovered a shortcut out of the maze-like castle. The entrance lay just behind the architect's painting. Pushing open the stone door, he did indeed find a passage, but it led to a secret chamber. Inside, he found the woman who had previously cried out for help, living inside a massive wooden box, muttering nonsensical things.
I'm hungry. He only gives me scraps.
The woman suddenly appeared behind him without making a sound. When Harker next awoke, He found himself imprisoned inside a wooden box. Dracula pulled him out and used a wooden stake to kill the female vampire. She had dared to claim the prey of the original vampire. By this time, Harker was on the brink of death. Dracula brought him to the balcony as the sun was about to set. The Count wanted Harker to describe the beauty of the sunset before he died. Harker, however, refused to cooperate and even spat at him. Dracula then announced his plan to head to London, promising Harker that he would visit Mina. Desperate, Harker crawled back into the shadows, begging Dracula to spare his fiancée. In response, Dracula killed him. Not long after, Harker came back to life, having entered the transformation stage. To Dracula's surprise, Harker still retained his human consciousness, unlike the mindless zombies in the castle's cellar. When Harker turned around, the sunlight reflecting off the crucifix on his chest caused Dracula great pain. Harker then fell from the castle, only to be rescued by Sister Agatha. After Harker recounted his ordeal, Agatha was overcome with excitement. The legend was true. Count Dracula feared sunlight. However, another nun quietly wept. She was none other than Harker's fiancée, Mina, who had traveled all the way from London to search for him. Despite Harker's transformation into something neither fully human nor fully vampire, Mina still loved him deeply. Suddenly, a swarm of bats stormed into the abbey, attacking Mina. Dracula had followed them there. Agatha quickly rallied the nuns to fight Dracula, but Harker's gaze was fixed on the blood trickling from Mina's forehead. Unaware of his change, Mina innocently rushed into Harker's arms. Harker wiped the blood from her forehead with his fingers, then greedily sucked it from his hand. Since the sun had not yet set, Dracula was forced to hide within the body of a wild dog, blocking the abbey's entrance. Once night fell, Dracula tore his way out of the dog's back, a gruesome sight that made the nuns retch. Led by Agatha, the nuns raised their wooden stakes. From outside, Dracula bellowed furiously, but none of the nuns dared meet his gaze. At this moment, Agatha stepped forward, opened the iron gate, and furiously rebuked Dracula, demanding he leave. Though Dracula was seething with rage, he could not enter the abbey. Agatha had confirmed her suspicion. A vampire could not step foot into a home without an invitation from its owner. Seeing that he couldn't enter the abbey, Dracula launched another attack. He promised the nuns behind Agatha that the first one to invite him in would not only survive, but also be granted eternal life. As for the others, they would all be torn to pieces. Agatha remained calm, her face full of mockery. She had faith in her sisters, but the human heart is vulnerable to temptation. To Agatha's surprise, the first to succumb to temptation was the abbess. Fortunately, before she could speak, Agatha had a plan. She sliced open her palm with a dagger, letting her blood flow freely. The once mighty Dracula was instantly reduced to a beast driven by desire. Like feeding a stray dog, Agatha flung her blood at Dracula's feet. Once again, Agatha diffused Dracula's attempts to turn the nuns against each other, strengthening their resolve. Dracula found himself deeply intrigued by this extraordinary woman. By licking the blood from the dagger, he learned more about Agatha's background.
Van Helsing! Agatha Van Helsing.
His interest in her grew stronger. She was a woman bold enough to challenge him. When Agatha returned to the chapel, she found that Harker had already driven a stake through his own heart. He had entered the final stages of transformation, but couldn't bear to harm his fiancée, so he ended his life with the stake. Mina, staring at her fiancé's lifeless body, was filled with hatred toward Dracula. Dracula scaled the rooftop with ease. At his soft command, Harker came back to life. Vampires couldn't commit suicide, only others could kill them. Dracula offered to end Harker's suffering, but only if Harker invited him in. Meanwhile, the abbess led the other nuns in prayer in the main hall. With one swift stroke, Dracula decapitated her. The terrified nuns scattered, but a pack of wild dogs blocked the exits. Dracula tossed the abbess's head into the crowd like a bouquet, declaring that whoever it hit would be granted the chance to be reborn. As he slaughtered the nuns, Agatha and Mina hid in the basement, forming a protective barrier with Holy Communion wafers. Neither woman could understand who had invited Dracula into the abbey. The screams above them eventually subsided, and a figure stepped into the room. It was Harker. Full of shame, He admitted that it was he who had invited Dracula. As a newly turned vampire, Harker was unable to enter the protective circle. Despite Agatha's warnings, Mina invited her fiancé inside. The moment Harker stepped over the barrier, his face twisted with malice. Mina noticed something strange. There were 2 heartbeats coming from Harker's chest. Harker ripped the skin from his face, revealing Dracula's handsome features beneath. Just as he could hide inside a wild dog, he could also parasitize a human. Mina was frozen in fear, while Agatha remained calm. She bared her neck, offering herself in exchange for Mina's life. Dracula, amused, remarked that he had a large appetite and could easily consume both of them. Agatha, however, held a dagger to her throat, threatening to kill herself. Knowing that vampires detested feeding on the dead, after weighing his options, Dracula had no choice but to let Mina go.
Sucker.